Good afternoon and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Supercoach Hub's Round 21 TLT podcast. It's just me tonight, Scoop, and we're going to go through the team lists very quickly, and then we're going to move on to the top positional buys or the top guns you'll want for the run home. The major and minor buys finished last week with round 20. We had the Raiders, Rabbitohs, and the Dragons on the buy, and now we've got the full set of teams for the run home with just the one buy every week. So pretty much this image here tells you most of what you need to know. Cleary's back, Latrell's back. We're going to go through a couple of them before we jump in. But yeah, at this stage of the season, it's basically nuffs and guns and maybe a couple of fallen guns that we can use for a little bit of a discount, but it's not really too much going on. Sean Johnson's still there. His baby was born. Sean Johnson is great. Chance is at fullback. Tohu is named. He was sick last week. Apparently, Webster said in his press conference it wasn't an injury or his minutes managed from that point of view, but he was sick. So don't be too worried about Tohu at the moment. Rabbitohs, Latrell is back. The gun fullback that you might want for the run home, he and Scott Drinkwater look potentially the top two options for the run home. And it's kind of a shock that Latrell is so much cheaper than Drinkwater at the moment. It's been crazy how it's going. Reece Walsh is back, but I don't know if you'd want to bring him in for the run home. Damien Cook owners, he's there, but Havili's on the bench. So we'll see whether Havili takes minutes off Cook like he did just before Origin a couple of weeks ago. We've got Payne Haas back from that injury. I think he'll be ready to go after having that extra week off. He should be really good. Moving on to the Titans and Roosters, it's pretty much as per program. AJ Brimson moves back to fullback after being rested last week. The big news out of this game is pretty much that Tino is gone. Tino is not even named. He looks like he's going to get a suspension and could be a sell. And you might want to move him on. Use his cash to get one of these big guns. It'll be difficult unless you've got some crazy jewels or you just make two trades and use his cash. Jake Turpin, for those who bought him for hooker, it's probably time to sell. You're probably hoping he got good minutes even with Chiefs back, but no, he went off after 30 minutes and did not come back. Knights and the Storm, we've got Ponga, we've got Gagai back with after that, plantar fascia injury. He had an extra week off. We thought he might play last week, but he wasn't around. We've got Greg Marzu. A lot of these guys in the Knights backline are reasonably relevant, but especially Ponga, Gagai, and Greg Marzu. We've got Munster over there. Ponga and Munster look probably two of the best options for your 5'8" for the run home. We've got Cody Walker as well. He's going to be there as per program. And there's not too much else here other than Harry Grant is named. Nothing really different happening there. Drinkwater is great. Sivo is getting ridiculously cheap, but I don't think it's that time of year for him. Mitchell Moses, one of those four halves you probably want. Nanai's there. Lukey isn't back yet, so we don't have to worry about him having minutes stolen off him. We also have Regan Campbell-Gillard suspended, which is good for Hopgood, potentially Ryan Madison's minutes. So we might not need to sell Hopgood just yet, but we'll just see how it goes. Panthers versus Bulldogs. Biggest news of the week, pretty much. Nathan Cleary is in after being a last-second withdrawal versus the Bulldogs. This could be an absolute monster score. If there is a week to get Cleary, it's this week. Even with his large break-even and even with his price and things like that and the high re-injury risk, if you're going to get him, it's probably this week versus the Bulldogs. It could be a monster score from him. Those holding on to Matt Burton, it's probably time to get rid of him. There's just better options at the moment. And after all that, move on to the Sharks game. Sharks have made a couple of changes actually, some that could affect a few things. Mulatalo has been absolutely dreadful the last 2 weeks, but instead of Wade Graham moving to his edge, which might have even just confirmed poor scores for Mulatalo for the rest of the season, they've changed it up a bit. Connor Tracy moves into the centres and Talakai for owners is sadly on the interchange. So that will be an interesting one. Those two changes are the main ones. And we've got Jesse Colquhoun starting on the edge there. He's cheap, but I don't know if I'd really chase him. He could turn into an AE nightmare if he moves at any stage, really. So yeah, it's pretty much as per program, just those couple of things changing with the Sharps team, Latrell and Cleary. So let's pop on over to the Supercoach site and we'll have a look at what we've got. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at my team and how I'd sort of set up. It's not a fantastic team. I had a few things go wrong with it this year, but we'll start up the top with the hookers. Harry Grant's probably your man, probably one you want for the run home over pretty much anyone else. If you do have Damien Cook, I don't know if it's worth spending a trade to move him on, as I discussed on the Sunday podcast with Myth. But yeah, he's probably the top option, especially with Marshall King just having that lingering shoulder injury. Anyone else in the hooker position, there's not too many. It's either go completely gun or go down to the bottom. And there are a couple of options, not too many. Somebody who might be a real interesting, crazy option that might just work out for you is Cody Nikarima. He's killed it since he's gone back to fullback and has been doing really well in a backline position with a high ceiling. If he's your second hooker option beside Harry Grant, you wouldn't be doing anything wrong at all. If you have him at 5'8", I reckon it could be a really good potential move to move him to hooker through duels and buy somebody like Cameron Munster this week if you're going to do that. So at the moment, there's not really a lot of appealing options. I don't know if I'd go out and buy guys like Damien Cook or Reed Martin. It's pretty much just Harry Grant for the top. If you have Damien Cook, I would probably not trade and I would hold. Somebody else on the opposite end of the spectrum, though, somebody who is a lot cheaper, Harrison Graham. He's on the buy. It's not really a good practice to buy players who are on the buy, but I think the Dolphins physios or like their medical team was saying there is more damage to the shoulder than just the AC joint for Jeremy Marshall King. And if that is the case, and he does end up needing surgery and is out for the season, because there were fears of that initially when he did his shoulder again a couple of weeks ago, I suppose they're probably going to give him until after the bye with this extra rest to see if he can get it right. But if not, Harrison Graham could be a very nice cash down option for the run home. If Jeremy Marshall King is rubbed out for the year, he won't be a fantastic scorer, but he won't be the worst AE nightmare as well. So it probably is Harrison Graham and really Grant for me at the moment. There's not really a lot of other options that I'm particularly interested in, like Sonny Luke, just a nightmare. Chris Randall's not really a hooker anymore. He sort of moved into the middle. So it's hooker's pretty simple. It's pretty much Harry Grant or Cook and maybe Cody Nikarima and a cash down here or there. So we'll move on quickly to the front row forwards. Again, not a position you probably want to focus on too much compared to the ceiling guys in the run home, in your backline positions. But the big news, obviously, for many coaches is that Tino is going to get suspended. So he's potentially someone you can move on or downgrade a little bit to get money for someone like a Cleary or a Latrell. If you can say really a lot of these top six, you'd be pretty happy if two of them were your front row and you just leave it there. Even if your other two bench positions for the front row forwards are really cheap, I don't know if you really need that much more, especially when you've got guys like Corey Horsburgh, Tohu Harris, all of those guys with duels that you can move up into the forwards into the front row forwards if you need them to from week to week. So Adam returned with a bang. He's now a fair bit cheaper than he was before, but with the buy coming up, I don't know if I'd go after him or Tohu Harris. Tohu Harris, if you're an owner, don't panic. As I said, it was mostly just sickness. If you want to go and check about 4 minutes into the post-game interview with Andrew Webster. But yeah, likewise, I wouldn't touch until after the buy. So probably Payne Haas, and a couple of these others. Front row forwards is reasonably simple. Jesse Colquhoun is very cheap. He's 216k, I think. So, I mean, if you're willing to take the gamble that he stays there and isn't going to become like a 15 average after a couple of weeks, he could be an option. But yeah, I don't know how much I trust it. Although it is interesting that the Sharks were willing to chop and change so much with Moylan out, Trindle in, Talakai bench, and interesting things like that this week. So maybe he does stay there. It's something to ponder. We'll move on now to second row. And it's simple and complicated. It's David Fafita, it's Britton Nikora, and it was Tino if you weren't going to have him in front row forwards. But now, with the suspension, you've got some money to move on. I would say it's probably ideal world. You have these two here and then fill in any of the others with guys like Hopgood, with guys like Yo, potentially, Tarpane, Harris. There's a few guys who can really stick there. Jeremiah Nanai is reasonably cheap compared to a few of these guys. He's moved up a fair bit now, so he's actually no, he's not that cheap anymore. Hey, he's moved up into their price bracket. So with the threat of, I think the Cowboys draw is reasonably tough on the run home. I don't know if I'd chase him as much now that he's already got to that price. I think he was 600 flat last week and a lot less in the previous weeks. But yeah, I would say it's David Fafita, Britton Nikora, and the rest really. Nikora is just run such a good line outside Hines for those late bailout tries, really. But are they bailouts if they get him to 100? So he's just got what it takes to be an option this year at the edge. And yeah, fantastic option if you don't have him already. A couple of other options at a bit of a cheaper price. You might have a vague look at some of these guys like Alakawatu. But like, there's not really that many I would chase other than the top guys. Like Tyson Frizzell, it's not historically a real relevant guy, but I mean, if he can rev up in the run home, it would be good. The Cardi Party, look, it lives on. I don't think you can see somebody you can really go after though at this stage. So yeah, there's Jesse Colquhoun is also available at a cheap price here in this position. So whether you go after that, I'm not sure. But yeah, there's definitely a few options you could potentially go for. So my mouse has just died, which is handy. But yeah, so in the second row, I think you can definitely afford to have enough at this stage. I brought in Tellus Duncan for round 19, which worked out really nicely, and then he can just sit for the rest of the year. Because you've got a few positions there, it is a position where you can have one or two nuffs and cheapen up a bit. But yeah, I think the second row forwards, it's Fafita, Nikora, and then the rest, really. Now, the big one. What do you do with Sean Johnson, Mitch Moses, and Nathan Cleary, hey? Nicho Hines is great. Nicho Hines is doing well. He's pretty much the highest average this year. He's got a 3 and 5 round average of over 100 as well. But Sean Johnson, he is about 100k difference from Nathan Cleary. Nathan Cleary has got an astonishingly good matchup this week. But let's just quickly go and have a look at Johnson's run home. We saw last week he put the Sharks to the sword. 3 consecutive hundreds, not that long ago. So really, 4 in the last 6. That's something you really want in your team. And if you've got the Raiders as by far your hardest opponent coming up, that really bodes well. In all honesty, there is a chance he could match Cleary or even outscore him. If you've got Titans, Tigers, Sea Eagles, Dragons, and then Dolphins to round out the year, if that was Hines or Cleary there, you would bank on 100 average for the run home there. So if you're an owner of Sean Johnson, I don't know if I would move him to Cleary. It's very tough not to own him for this week, but it's more a question of, do you move Mitchell Moses onto Cleary, where it's a lot closer in price, and the run home isn't quite as friendly. You've got Cowboys, who are absolutely flying high. You've got the Storm. You've got games against the Broncos and the Panthers as well. So potentially Mitchell Moses, especially since he misses round 27, could be someone that you do look to move on for Nathan Cleary. I would have him fourth in the pecking order of the gun halves that you can have for the rest of the year. Some of these other ones, like DCE, Burton, like they're just a step below, and I don't know if it's really worth bringing them in at all at this point, or even having them. So I think it's mainly a question of, do you switch to Cleary or not? And for me, the answer is, if you have Johnston, no. And if you have Moses, yes, if you have the trades. I'm going to have to make a decision on that because I can't quite straight swap them, but we'll see what I can do with a bit of fiddling around. Okay, moving on to 5/8 position. It's really, is there anyone hotter at the moment than Kalen Ponga? You'd be hard pressed to find someone like Drinkwater and Ponga. It's the story of the season and the position. If you've got Ponga and Drinkwater at fullback, that's the gun pair really. Like, do you even bring in Latrell? But I think the move would be to have Ponga at 5/8, where I know a lot of people do have him, including myself, and buying Latrell at fullback potentially. So Dylan Brown is still suspended for another couple of weeks, so we can't look at him. And I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he goes on his return, because it was a very big thing that happened, and the team's been doing relatively well with Arzi at 5/8. So it might take a game or two to just adjust back to what they had. Cody Walker and Cameron Munster are the next gun options. They're traditionally two of the best options at 5/8 every year. If you don't have either, it's really a question of how well do you think bunnies are going to go in the run home. I think he's a little bit more expensive, at about 70k difference. If we have a look at their draw though, he does have a reasonably high break even as well. So one thing with Munster, he doesn't have a buy in the run home. There is a slight risk, depending on where they finish on the ladder, that he might get rested, but it's not as high as probably the Penrith blokes. But yeah, let's just have a quick look at what Cody Walker is going to do in the run home. So he's got Broncos this week, which is a little bit tough. Tigers, nice easy matchup. Sharks, arguably not that tough, based on what we've seen with Sharks versus top 8 teams. But they did make a few changes, so that remains to be seen. Dragons, Knights, bye, and then the Roosters to finish off. The Roosters traditionally come home strong, but I just can't see them doing it this year. They didn't start off that well this last week, so Cody Walker could score a couple of tons in here, particularly against Tigers and the Dragons. So I can definitely see why you would pick Cody Walker ahead of Cameron Munster if you don't have either at the moment. It's really just a matter of, who do you pair if you don't already have them? I know a lot of people probably do have two of these. I have Munster and Ponga. Some will have Manu at 5/8. I have him at centre wing. If you have Manu at 5/8, I think this is a good week for you to bring in one of these and put Manu back at centre wing. Or, I mean, do you contemplate selling him for the run home? Like, he's really a consistent performer year on year, but the Roosters just are not doing real well at all. And I mean, I know who I'd prefer out of Manu and Val Holmes at the moment. So yeah, it's a tough one to look at Tom Dearden all the way up at 829. He's been on fire, but like, I think he's done his job. Like, he's too much. The Cowboys would have to keep performing ridiculously well for you to even look at him. But, I mean, if you really want a crazy option, maybe you could go him. I just don't really see it. Metcalf has been all right for people who have him. I do think it's a good week to move on, though. Or maybe next week when they're on the bye. Cody Nikorima, if you have him at 5/8, it's a tough decision on what to do. I think the best decision could be to move him up to hooker. if you do have him at the moment, and then buy one of these 5/8 guns. Potentially pairing Nicarima with Grant for the run home. I'm trying to think, are there any cheap options you can sort of nuff out? It's not really a position you can do very well with nothing out because you don't have much cover. Yeah, I'd probably just look at these guys and then get enough in the next position, which I have done with a few Rabbitohs blokes. I went Munro a couple of weeks ago. He did a good job for me, but I think he's injured. That's one word that's coming out from a couple of Souths people, that he might be injured for now. I'm not sure how bad, but yeah, he's somebody that, I mean, could potentially stay on that wing for the year if he ever comes back. But yeah, it's not a certainty as to what happens there. But he's still base price. And I mean, if he does get dropped, well, then he's just not going to turn into an AE nightmare if he ends up underperforming as well. So for centre wing, we've got Greg Marzu. A lot of people have him. He's been a staple this year. He's just been so consistent, racking up tackle breaks, racking up tries and runs. He's just an absolute beast of a man. He's so strong, and he can carry defenders over the line for huge points for that play. Somebody who is really getting up there in price now, but probably somebody you still do want to consider given how good the Cowboys are at the moment is Val Holmes. He's got one of the top averages at the moment for recent form. I would definitely pick him over Tango if you do have the funds. I am a bit worried about Tango with Cleary returning. If we have a look at him, I know a lot of people who do have him or who jumped on him, although it's not the most people. If you do have, is that Tango? Yeah. You can definitely see that he's sort of middle to long until Cleary has gone out. And I think that may be what's pushed his scoring up. Luai taking a bit more control of the team and being a bit more left side dominant. I can definitely see that regressing a little bit. And yeah, although he's very, very tempting, given what we know he can do as well when he's given the opportunity, I'm not sure if he's somebody I would chase over a Marju if you don't have him for some reason at the moment, or somebody else. Chance Nickel-Klukstad. He is a fantastic option. He's had a down game or two recently, so he's actually coming back a little bit from what he was priced at before. I would probably go for him after the Warriors buy, though, if you are able to. So not the one I would really look to chase this week, particularly if you've nuffed out at centre wing a little bit. Ruben Garrick, fullback. We love him at fullback. I don't know if you would play him at fullback in Supercoach, though. I think you can get a few more points there if you are able. But yeah, unless you've got... One thing to note, all these players, they're the ideal situation. I mean, unless you have a team that's like well over 16 million, you really can't just get every single player you want. So these are a list of some of the best players, but as I was reiterating before, it's really, for me, it would be Cleary and Latrell, and then the rest. So you can definitely chase guys like Drinkwater and Ponga if you don't have them yet. I think especially Ponga, given he's a lot cheaper than Drinkwater still, is definitely someone you're going to want, whether it's at 5/8 or fullback. So those are the three I'd really look for this run home if you don't have all three already. After this week, that is when you trade. So it's a bit of a strange one, centre wing. There are a few good options who are underperforming. There's a few good options who are quite expensive now, so it's tough to chase them, like Valentine Holmes. But I think if you are able to afford some of these guys, like Valentine Holmes, like Margie, like Nickel-Klukstad, I think you're going to be really well set for the run home, especially in those head-to-heads where they can be a match winner for you. Somebody who you can potentially put the VC on are really those guys you want to chase. Those, if you are buying someone you think, yeah, they could be good. They might not leak that many points, and they're like 150k cheaper. They can be good, especially if you get 2 or 3 or 4 of them for just 1 or 2 of the really elite options. That can really spread the value if you haven't got a really high squad value team like me at the moment. But I think that you really want to look for guns, ideally, that you can put the captaincy option with some confidence. I have Dylan Edwards. I don't think I'll be looking to get Latrell because I've got Edwards with Cleary coming back. He did fantastic early in the year. But yeah, I don't know if I'd ever be really looking to put captaincy option on him, whereas Latrell, you can definitely do it without even thinking based on matchups week to week. So we'll move on to fullback now. Last position. Isn't this just astonishing? Like, this is a 2021 type run from Scott Drinkwater, one of the very few players who have made it over 1 million. The question is, if you don't have him, do you go after him? I don't know whether I would, to be honest. He's just so much more than some of these other options like Latrell or like even Dylan Edwards, to be honest. Like, I think there's a 400 or 450k price difference between Dylan Edwards and Scott Drinkwater at the moment. And I don't know. Yeah, there we go. It is about that much. I don't know if I would justify potentially sacrificing a whole nother gun with nearly 500k to get Scott Drinkwater at the moment when you can go for a Latrell, you can go for somebody like that. Would I sell Scott Drinkwater if I have him? Potentially, if he starts to go bad? I mean, I don't know. It depends on how much the Cowboys' form changes, if they do. But, like, he's got a lot of money tied up in him at the moment, and I'm not sure I'd go and lock in that value, that salary cap in that one player, unless you're really loaded and you can afford to chase somebody like that. So somebody who you might consider to move to Scott Drinkwater, if you're not confident in their run home with their tough matchups, Clint Gutherson, he is one of the most expensive fullbacks at the moment, and I know who I'd prefer to own out of Latrell and Gutho for the run home, and it's not even that much of a question at 100k difference, in my opinion. So I don't know if he's a sell yet, because, I mean, he's done absolutely fantastic, but I would definitely monitor Gutherson from week to week, and if you do have an opportunity to move him up to Drinkwater, it's a lot easier to get him there compared to a lot of other players. So Ponga, if you don't have him, I probably would still go for him. He is producing pretty much Drinky levels, or very close, at 200k cheaper. Latrell and Ponga would probably be the ideal fullback for the run home if it wasn't for Scott Drinkwater. So yeah, I think I would really. It's sort of tough to. It's sort of tough to say chase all these players when, like, 70% of them are already in your team, and you've just got to wait for the ones to come around that aren't. But Latrell is definitely someone who can absolutely win matchups, absolutely go for 150 points on his day, depending on the matchup. So I think fullback isn't a position that you can afford to go cheap in. The cheapest I would even consider is Dylan Edwards. I don't know if I'd have Chance or Garrick at fullback. I'd probably much prefer them in centre wing. And really try and get these big players. The two positions I think you can nuff, because there are so many, are obviously centre wing and second row. So if you can, say, sell, for example, if you can sell a Reece Robson and a Talakai, for example, and someone else at a similar price, and get two of those big guns like Latrell, like Ponga, like Munster, and enough, if you've still got a boost at this stage, that's the sort of thinking I'd be going with. I'm not the most elite Supercoach player by any means, but there are certain strategies that just work across all platforms. Something I would quickly like to shout out, though, which might interest Supercoach players, is the NRLW starts this week in conjunction with the men's round 21. And if you've been on the NRL website, you might have popped up and seen the Mixer. That is a sort of fantasy Supercoach related comp where you get to pick one in each position. It's a little bit different with fantasy versus Supercoach, but 3 players from both the men's and the women's comp and a captain for each. And that could be good fun if you're having a bit of a down season like me and want some spark to finish off the year. So I wish everybody well for the upcoming week. This is probably the week that you want to gun up for the run home, and then sort of sit it out and wait until either your head-to-head grand final in round 26 or the overall finish in round 27 with your Eels players on the bye. So good luck this week, everybody, and we'll see you in the round wrap.